I'd like to welcome everyone to our Revised Common Lectionary Bible study that we have on a regular basis. They usually come out around noon on Tuesdays and Fridays. And today we have as our texts the text from the Hebrew Scriptures, that is Genesis and Psalms, for the first Sunday of Lent. And as you can tell, since the 17th was Ash Wednesday and is the technical beginning of the season of Lent, we now have February 21st, the first Sunday in Lent. And I would like to begin with our text from Genesis, and it's in the 9th chapter. And one of the things that we could say about this text is it has to do with covenant, the covenant between Yahweh and Noah. Up to the time of Noah, we have seen this continuing story of human beings sort of evolved. We had Adam and Eve, and the very first primordial couple disobeys God's word, and they eat from the tree in the midst of the garden. The fruit, a lot of times people think it was an apple tree, but it just says fruit tree in the Bible itself. And it was the first human disobedience. And then Adam and Eve have a child, two children, actually, two brothers. And the elder kills the younger out of jealousy. And we just have this sort of snowballing effect that the human beings spread human sin continuously. And so Yahweh, in order to curb this acceleration of human sin, decides to just start over, and he floods the earth. That's, of course, the flood story that we read about in Genesis. And once the flood comes, everything is destroyed, animals, people, everything. And God does give one dispensation, and that is he saves Noah's family, and they will begin to repopulate the earth. And we have the story of the ark with the animals that go on two by two and so on and so forth. So anyway, the text for today talks about this idea of covenant between God and Noah. And the first thing that God says in chapter 9, verse 1, the text tells us that God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth," which was the very thing that God told Adam and Eve at the very beginning of the book of Genesis. So when we skip down to verse 8 of chapter 9, this is what we have. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "As for me," and that is God, Yahweh, speaking for God's self, "I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you." So this covenant isn't just between God and Noah, or God and Noah and his sons. It is with every descendant that will come after them. And not only that, with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. So what we have here is a complete do-over of creation. With Noah, we have this idea that God will make a covenant between Noah and God, between God and all the animals, with Noah's sons, with all the descendants that will come after them. And so this idea of our text today is what happens in the era right after the flood and how it's established in this sort of covenantal language that God will give. Uh, Murder in a moment will be specifically denied people, and from now on, people up to this point had eaten only what you would call vegetables or things that grew from the earth. Now they are permitted to eat flesh, and so they become meat eaters or lovers of fine barbecue everywhere. So I want you to know that two things transpire in this speech of Yahweh's. He says, beginning at verse 11, I establish my covenant with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every creature that is with you for all future generations. So this tells us that God is speaking to Noah, to his sons families, and he speaks to and for all of the animals. And this is the most important thing in the text is probably the promise to never again destroy the earth by water. And as God makes this speech, we see first of all that it's in very sort of what is called juridical or legal terminology as he makes this covenant. And the second one is that God designates the rainbow as a sign of the covenant. That's where we see in verse 13, I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. So between Yahweh and Yahweh's creation of the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. And so this idea of the rainbow, it's a beautiful thing that we see from time to time. There are certain places on earth where you can see rainbows pretty regularly. Hawaii is one of those places. Sometimes when you're in a place where there's a lot of waterfall and there's a lot of water vapor and the sun is shining through it, you can also see that there is a rainbow, multicolored, all the colors of the spectrum are there. But what I find most interesting about this speech and this text, especially at the very end, is that God says, when the rainbow is seen, it's not so much a reminder to human beings, although it is that. It is primarily a reminder to Yahweh to remember his covenant and his promise to never destroy the earth again by water. It's a reminder to Yahweh of his covenant with Noah, his sons, and all of creation. That's a very important thing for us to remember. Something else that I just want to point out as we begin to wind down this particular text is that you will notice that in this text, Noah does not do any talking. There's no negotiation. There's no quibbling about this, that, or the other thing. There's no details, no questions for clarification. It is Yahweh and Yahweh alone who speaks in this particular text. And in the way that this text is talked about, we have the feeling and we have the knowledge that God sets up this covenant by divine fiat. It is God's commanding the covenant. It is not a brokered sort of agreement between two people. Covenant really has to do with God and people, or between two people. And it's not a contract, it's a verbal agreement. And so this is very important for us to know. I guess this is one of the really important covenants that's made in the Bible. There are going to be several of them as we move through Lent. There will be the covenant that Jeremiah says that God cuts on the hearts of human being, and that's in a way what it means to cut a covenant. There will be the covenant at Sinai, or the Decalogue covenant. And the other one will be the covenant that God makes with Abraham in Genesis 17. So stay tuned for more covenantal talk over the next few weeks. Now I would ask us to take a look at Psalm 25. And we will look at the first, I believe it's 10 verses of Psalm 25. It's a prayer of guidance and deliverance. Now, one of the things to remember about Lent is about the suffering and degradation of Jesus. It's about Jesus' passion. It's about Jesus' ministry. It's about Jesus' journey to the cross. But as well, it's also a season which we would call a penitential season, where people do penance and they recognize their human sinfulness. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. And Psalms are often excellent ways to frame our prayers of contrition and forgiveness, and our calls for mercy and also for forgiveness. So let's take a look. This is a prayer for guidance and for deliverance, and it's one of the Psalms of David. And so this is how it begins. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. And that phrase is very similar to what is printed on our money and what is printed on our coins. Oh my God, in you I trust. And on the coins it says, in God I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me. And so the one who is praying here is praying that God will protect him from those humanoids or human beings that try to do this person damage, either to his reputation, to his livelihood, to perhaps even his physical body. He wants protection from God, and he wants deliverance from God. Do not let those who wait for you be put to shame. In other words, people like him, people of faith. Let them be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Now, we don't ever talk about our enemies currently, our contemporaries, as wantonly treacherous, but the idea is that they are evil and need to be watched. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Let me in your truth and teach me. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I will wait all day long. These two verses talk about the benefits of trusting God, believing in God, and letting God teach us, letting Yahweh make his paths known to us. This has to do with truth, which in our culture today seems to be in short supply. Everybody has his or her opinions about things, but as we know from Greek philosophers and Jesus himself, opinions are not facts. Even if we title them alternative facts, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily the truth. And then this psalmist prays, be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love. It's a reminder. It's the prayer says, remember, God, you're the one who is merciful and you have steadfast love. For they have been from old. In other words, you've always had these, and we have clung to these attributes, these divine attributes, for all these years. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgression. According to your steadfast love, remember me for your goodness' sake, O Lord. What this person wants is for God to take this prayer at face value now, not holding his past sins and transgressions against him, those that he may have committed when a youth, but from this moment forward, remember him according to God's goodness or God's mercy, implementing God's forgiveness for him. And then in verse 8 it says, good and upright is the Lord, therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right, and he teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his decrees. And it is this last verse of Psalm 25:10 that helps us understand why this particular psalm may have been chosen to be paired with the Genesis text that we just looked at a moment ago, and it is because of that word covenant. Covenant defines the basic relationship between Yahweh and Yahweh's people. That is what is most important. And so I'd like to thank you for spending this time with me today, and I will ask you to join us later in the week. We will look at 1 Peter 3:18 through 22 and Mark 1:9 through 15. So thank you very much.